Hello students of the P260 class. In this video we're going to talk about the complex circuits of the brain. This is a part of Chapter 5's discussion, and one of the contrasts that I will be making is the difference between a complex circuit and a center in the brain. Now, a center for the brain goes back to an old and oversimplified belief that there are centers in the brain for certain functions and behaviors, such as a center for friendliness, or a center for being manipulative, or a center for anger, or a number of centers that are in the brain that are solely responsible for certain functions and behaviors that we may act out. Now, a complex circuit is very different than that, and it is more realistic than that from the perspective of the textbook and from my perspective. There are no such things as brain centers which can account for complex behaviors. It all must be understood in terms of complex circuits, which all interrelate and depend upon each other. We're looking at Chapter 5 on page 103 right now, and one of the sections of the section that I would like to direct your attention to is this sentence here, which says, "No one brain region or neural circuit is solely responsible for a behavior. Each region performs a function or set of functions that contributes to performance of the behavior." And so that sets up the importance of the circuitry, and that sets up the logic for why a brain center is not a reasonable conclusion to have. Now, for example, the act of reading, which is covered from this sentence here. The act of reading involves controlling eye movements, focusing the lens of the eye, perceiving and recognizing words and letters, comprehending the meaning of words, and so on. As you can see, there are a large sequence of events and functions which must take place for the act of reading. And it must be obvious to you that there is no such thing as a center for reading. Some of these functions that I have just mentioned also participate in other behaviors. That controlling eye movement and focusing, for example, these are required for any task that involves looking. And many of these brain mechanisms that are used for comprehension of the meaning of words, they also participate in comprehending speech and also making speech. And so you can see that there are many circuits that go into producing a behavior, and many parts of these circuits must be shared with many other behaviors. Another part of Chapter 5 is this section on tracing neural connections, tracing neural connections. Now, let's say that we're interested in the study of the physiology of sexual behaviors in female rats. We can start by performing a stereotaxic surgery on two groups of female rats. There's an experimental group in which we make a lesion in the ventromedial hypothalamus, the VMH. And then there will be a control group in which we do a sham surgery. And you can look up the meaning of a sham surgery. It's basically everything in a real brain surgery except for the lesion. After recovery, we find that it's only the control group of female rats that respond to male rats and has sex with them. The female rats in the experimental group rejected the flirtations of the male rats. This data shows that the VMH plays a role in the sexual behaviors of female rats. Is it appropriate, therefore, to call the VMH the center for sexual behavior in female rats? And the answer would be no. It would not be appropriate because of the many circuits of the brain which have inputs and outputs to and from the VMH and allows for the sexual behaviors to occur. The VMH does not stand alone as in a center. The sexual behavior requires the integration of visual, tactile, olfactory senses, and the organization of patterns of movements in response to the male rat. We can see here figure 5.14 in chapter 5, and this is on page 110, which shows the inputs and the outputs from the VMH, the ventromedial hypothalamus. This is a part of the circuitry of female sexual behaviors in the female rat. And what you ought to appreciate is that a disruption in any part of the circuitry will disrupt the sexual behavior. And so the VMH does not stand alone. It is not the center for sexual behaviors in female rats, but it is a part of a circuit, and the circuit must be intact and function normally in order for these sexual behaviors to be produced. Dr. Frank Beach said that he could hypothetically cut off the hind legs of a male beagle, and that beagle could not show sexual behavior. Did that mean that the hind legs of a male beagle are the center for sex? Because if you take it away, sex can't happen anymore. And the answer here again is no. There are many behaviors that must be integrated to demonstrate sexual behaviors. The legs are only one part of that expression, and I hope that's more than obvious to you. Dr. Paul Broca studied speech. If he hypothetically cut out the tongue of a person, of a verbal human being, that person could not speak. Does that mean that the tongue is the center for speech for that person? And the answer again is no. There are many functions and behaviors which must be integrated to result in the expression of speech. The tongue is only one part of that expression. There are many circuits in the body and brain which are important for the expression of behaviors. There is no evidence that there are brain centers for certain complex behaviors.